An expert in trauma has been uninvited to a mental health conference on the Gold Coast, allegedly because he's Israeli. Dr. Moshe Fachi travelled from Israel to attend the Frontline Mental Health Conference, only to learn he was no longer welcome. His hotel room cancelled. It's understood the organisers believed his appearance would pose a security risk. Let's bring in now the CEO of the Zionist Federation of Australia, Alon Casutto. Alon, thanks for your time. What's your fundamental issue here? Given security concerns, can you understand the organisers thinking and wanting to minimise the risk?
Look, Kieran, at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. We've allowed conference organisers, have allowed a bunch of racist bullies to win the day. And so we're outraged. It's a great shame. What's worse is that this is a conference that's organised by mental health practitioners for mental health practitioners, and they're succumbing to intimidation and bullying, to racism. And you've got to ask yourself, what kind of message does this send, where this conference was in service of frontline mental health workers, including a lot of mental health workers from the Australian Defence Forces. And here we have a world-leading expert in trauma who's preparing to deliver a keynote on resilience, on psychological first aid, a real gift to the Australian mental health practitioner community. And he was cancelled because a bunch of random pro-Hamas extremists sent some emails and made some phone calls and intimidated conference organisers. He wasn't cancelled because of anything that he said or did. He was cancelled because of his nationality, because of his identity as a Jew, as an Israeli. And for us, what we're seeing is that Australian practitioners were denied the opportunity to learn from an expert with endless experience in trauma. So if we ask ourselves, was there a security risk? Who knows? What we know is that a bunch of phone calls and emails were made. A small petition was signed by 180 people. And if that's all it takes to cancel a leading global expert in Australia and deplatform him, it begs the question, what kind of nation are we becoming where we can't protect these global experts from a bunch of extremists? His accommodation was cancelled, his registration was cancelled, so he couldn't attend even if he'd wanted to. And what's concerning is that Dr. Moshe Fachi is just one in an ever-growing number of cases of intimidation of Jewish medical professionals, of Jewish artists, of comedians, of musicians, of restaurant owners, all who are being cancelled, boycotted, simply because they're either Jewish or Israeli. And we've got to ask ourselves, what are we going to tolerate as a society? Would we tolerate this if any other minority was being cancelled based on their nationality or identity?
The organisers issued a statement saying, I'll just put it up on the screen, it says, our security expert advised us that based on the volume and nature of the abuse, there was insufficient time to conduct a thorough risk assessment at the hotel to ensure the safety of the 280 plus attendees. It sounds like the volume of the threats also were an issue in this context. Is this the feedback that you've received? Obviously, it's not the scenario that anyone would have wanted. The organisers certainly wouldn't, but they thought that others would have been at risk because of it.
Well, listen, Kieran, at the end of the day, I can't speak to the volume because we haven't been given the particulars or the details. But what I do know is that there's a petition signed by 180 people. It wasn't signed by 50,000 people. We didn't have hundreds of protesters storming the gates. And if a few emails and a few phone calls is all it takes in order to intimidate conference organisers, it sets a dangerous precedent because it encourages more of that type of behaviour. And what we would have expected is for Queensland Police, the conference organisers, security companies to say, hey, we've got a global expert here and we're not going to send him packing just because of a bunch of phone calls and emails. We're actually going to gear up to protect him, because otherwise it means that essentially intimidation and bullying tactics work. And that's a really dangerous precedent for us to set in this country.
Alon Casutto, Zionist Federation Chief Executive, appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you, Kieran.